Welcome back as we continue our exploration on personality. Today, we are going to be diving into a more complex way of understanding, defining, and categorizing personality in order to be able to better understand those around us, those that we've had conflicts with, those that we're trying to motivate and lead in a business professional setting. So, just to recap, personality, when we break it down, the concept of personality is sets of behaviors, cognitions, and emotional patterns, which in essence, the things we do, the things we feel, and the things we think, okay, make up our personality. And they come from a combination of a biological DNA standard as well as environmental factors and the influences in our lives, people, places, cultures, systems, etc., etc. All right. So that is what our personality is. It's all the things we do, think, and feel. All of our brains work differently than each other's, and to the same stimulus, to the same picture, to the same event, our brains are going to think different things, we're going to feel different things, and we're going to do different things based off of our personality. And the reason we want to understand personality is so that we can then better understand those people that are in our lives around us, so that we know how to motivate and help support those that we might be leading in a business setting. All right. So a reminder that this work that we are doing, this is helping to build what is commonly referred to as our emotional intelligence, our capacity to both be aware, control, and express our own relationships or our own emotions, as well as handle those relationships that we have with other people. And our formal term for this is social cognition. So good for you for continuing this learning and to help to develop this. So as I mentioned, today we are going to be focusing on a tool called Myers Briggs, okay? What this is it is a type indicator. So when you do a Myers Briggs assessment, you are given 4 letters or 4 indicators. Which are linked with different psychological types. This was a testing process and concept that was developed by Carl Jung's theory of psychological types. Okay, it is quite an old theory that continues to be developed, and just like a lot of things from our history, there are elements of the development of this and elements of the execution of this that can be problematic in some settings. Okay, but the overall concepts of this as a way to learn and understand how to frame personality is still beneficial in the workplace today, and it is still used in a number of very high level team building processes. So we can acknowledge the history that's there, but also acknowledge the benefits that's there. And so that is why we are continuing to study it and look at it today. Again, whether you use the formal Myers Briggs system or just use this as a tool to learn about personality and how you're going to understand how other people process information to make decisions, either or is going to be beneficial to your leadership and your management. All right. So before we look through this, I would highly suggest that you test yourself and get your results so that you have something to look off of and compare to, which should help you understand it. If you haven't done a Myers-Briggs test before, it's generally better done in person with somebody that is trained on it. However, I will link below a free website that will let you do at least a basic assessment so that you can get your initial results and you can use those to help you understand. As you can see here, there are going to be 4 different results that you're going to get. And in each of these areas, you're going to get one or the other, and it's going to be a spectrum. Okay, so first we're going to look at how you focus your attention, which is generally classified by either an E or an I for extroversion and introversion. Next, how you take in information is going to be an S or an N. How you make decisions is a T or an F, and how you deal with the world in general is a J and a P. And again, all of these indicators link back to that concept of personality that we talked about, okay? So we talked about that our personality influences what we think, what we feel, and what we do. And again, making decisions after taking in information, that is that leading to that end result of what is there. So if you want to learn more about this specific program and test, the link is here. I will also link it down below, and you can read more about getting trained or finding a trained professional, but I've also linked that free assessment for you to do yourself. All right, so the first result that you're going to get is either going to be an E or an I. I want to remind you that even though most of the assessments just pop out and say you are one. So for example, mine came out today when I did it that I was an extrovert or I was extroverted. It came out as an E. But when I look at the spectrum, this gives me more information. You can see that I am 56% an E. I am very close to the middle. I am not a very strong E or a very strong I, and that definitely means something. Okay, so looking at your results, where did you end up? We're going to explain what that means, and then you can decide, was this free test successful or not? Does this define you? All right, so introverts and extroverts, we've talked about this in our last video a little bit. Introverts are people that look for less stimulating situations. We often refer to those as quiet workspaces. And more importantly, they need to recharge their batteries away from social settings and stimulus. So they may be the life of a party and they may go out to those things, but at the end of it, they are drained and they need to recharge. Whereas our extroverts are the ones that are gaining energy from those situations. Okay, so does this make sense for you? Okay, personally, I've always identified as more of an introvert. So again, those more in-depth questions on a personal assessment would have given me that result when I've done that. Whereas on our Form 1, this is coming out a little bit more extroverted. Okay, but what does this mean to us? So if I know that on my team in work, and we're going to look at everything through business lens, everyone that I have 5 extroverts and 3 introverts on my team. What exactly am I going to do with that information? Well, generally, and again, every individual is different and this is a spectrum, but generally we see that extroverts are going to answer questions much more quickly. They will share information more easily. They will ensure that they are heard in group meetings. Okay, and they like group work. So when I have my team, I know that my extroverts are going to be the ones participating. They're probably going to be the first ones that come up with solutions, that are going to talk through problems. As a teacher, they're great because they're the ones that break that awkward silence after I first ask a question. Okay. Whereas my introverts, they're going to need time to think, okay, before they answer. And they are more likely to come up with really in-depth solutions that are well thought out. Okay, so knowing my team, my introverts would probably, I'd want to give my introverts a prompt or what we're going to be talking about in advance. Okay, let's make sure I get that meeting agenda with all of the details sent out a few days in advance so that my introverts have time to think about it and be prepared so that they feel more comfortable sharing in a meeting. Okay. Or if something's come up in the meeting, don't make a final decision in the meeting. Like, hey, okay, we've got lots of ideas. Let's everybody go and think about it. We're going to meet again in a few days. Okay. Also, I might need to make sure that I have a way for my introverts to be more willing and able to share. So we've seen lots of these practices, you know, like whether it's a passing sticker, everybody gets to talk before somebody gets to talk again. Or even just an acknowledgement. You know, I've been in lots of meetings where they've said, you know, like everybody be cognizant of who you are and how you talk. If you're somebody that's not as willing to talk, please make an effort. If you're somebody that talks a lot, please make an effort to limit that and give other people space. Okay. And we know, again, our introverts probably need a quieter or less sensory workstation to do their best work and to be satisfied at work. All right. The next indicator that we would be looking at is our S and our N. Okay. These are called sensing and intuition. And this is how we process information that's given to us. So we're going to do a quick little activity. Okay. I've put this picture up on the screen. I'm going to stop talking in just a second. I want you to stare at the photo and just let your brain think whatever it thinks about the photo. If you want more time, you can pause the video and take it. Okay. But this photo is giving your brain information. Anything, whether it's words, whether it's sounds, whether it's photos, they give your brains information. But the reality is that when we looked at this photo, we all saw very, very different things. Okay, so for example, when I first looked at this photo, the very first thing I did was count the people. Okay, so I knew that there were 13 people in this photo. Okay, sorry, there was 13 people at the bus stop. There was also one person at this back bench over here. Okay, I recognize that they were at a bus stop. Those types of things. When I did this activity in person with a number of people, some people told me that the very first things that they noticed was that that it was a sunny day, or that, you know, that their brains came up with a story of what was happening. That, you know, all of these people, they were like giving these people backstories about what their lives were like. Okay. Other people were identifying with the colors, or they were thinking about like where this might be. Okay. Oh, the sign is in English, so it's probably in an English speaking area. The way that people are dressing tell me that maybe this is located here. Okay. So when presented with information, all the same information, the exact same photo, all of our brains went and did something different with it. Okay. Ms. King's brain went to counting people and identifying where they were at. Okay. Other people's brains went to creating stories and backgrounds and information. Some artists might have been like, oh, I wonder what textile material this was made out of. All right. And this is the processing of information. Okay. Generally, people who are high on the S in sensing, they live in the now and they enjoy facts. Okay. So they are simply looking at a photo. That's all it is. It's a photo. Okay. And I'm looking for facts in it. I counted the number of people in it. Okay. Whereas people who are much higher on the N side of things for intuitive, okay, they try and find deeper meanings in things. Okay. And so again, you can look at your results. Mine, I'm smack dab in the middle of it. And so again, what that means is that I'm often in this weird conflict, and it can be very difficult for people that know me because they might only know me as a sensing person. And so that's what they expect. And then all of a sudden I jump over to the intuition side. Okay. So there can be these extra levels in here as well. All right. This is one of the big parts of the Myers Briggs that can help you understand relationships and especially conflict with other people. Okay. How we process that information that is given to us. Okay. Again, if I'm further on my sensing side or somebody is further on the sensing side, okay, they are enjoying facts. They want to know the facts. I want the numbers. I want the statistics. Okay. And it's about now. It's about the situation that we are in right now. Whereas our intuitives are generally trying to think deeper about it. Maybe they're looking at how we got to where we are or what the future is going to hold. And they're a little bit less focused on those facts. And so it can come off possibly as not caring as much either way. Okay. Because again, if I'm sitting there being like, oh, well, only, 20 people have died of COVID and other diseases like cancer have a higher percentage. So why is everybody freaking out? To an intuitive, they're like, how can you not care about all of these lives and these stories of these people? Okay. Whereas our intuitives could be very, very deep into kind of like the overarching meaning on something. And to our sensing, who are like, we have facts in front of us. This data tells us that our company is not going to survive if we don't lay somebody off. Then the intuitives delay and want to consider other aspects can be very, very frustrating and seem insensitive as well. All right. So this is kind of how we process that information. Why would this matter and how would this help us? Well, I mean, ideally in most teams, we need both. Okay. When we see headlines of businesses who have made decisions that seem very, very insensitive or that society is in an uproar about, it's generally because they've only had one type on the decision-making team. And so both sides were not considered. Again, both sides are not going to necessarily agree, but if they're both considered, that generally there's going to be a solution that's either more appealing to everybody or there's going to be an acknowledgement of what the outcome might look like and some premeditated steps along the way. Okay. Generally, we lean towards sensing. Okay, simply because people who are high up in finance tend to be sensing because they've been gravitated towards a job that involves numbers. Okay, and again, we know that 80% roughly in North America of our CEOs, our biggest decision makers, came up through finance. Okay, and so we're going to see that. Okay. However, especially nowadays with our constantly changing business environment, our intuitives are far more important. Okay. They are very generally good at our creative plans. Okay. They're good at long term planning. Okay. Strategic planning. Whereas our sensors are generally better at short term, realistic, detailed oriented, which again, depending on the job you're trying to fill, an accounting person or a marketing person, or whether you're looking at kind of that long run, short run, you're going to want a good mix there, and you can make those choices accordingly. The next thing that is looked at is how people make decisions. So the other one was how we interpreted, how we thought about information that was presented to us. And then now we've thought about it and we need to make a decision with it. So they are very much interconnected, okay? But there can be combinations of different ones. So this one we have thinking and feeling, and I think the language on this one is a lot easier for students to understand. T for thinking, F for feeling. Okay, thinkers prefer to take all of the information gathered, whether it was through sensing or intuition, and make logical, objective, and analytical decisions. Okay, so again, generally, we are going to have okay, those people that you would consider to be super insensitive are going to be that combination of sensing, they're interpreting everything in numbers and in concrete data, and then thinkers as well. And they're taking that data and they're making very logical, objective decisions, and they're not taking other factors into effect. Okay, so I've shared in another video that, growing up, I thought my brother was just a cruel human being. Okay, but I found out later on he was a sensor and a thinker. Okay, he would take data from what was presented to him and he would make very logical decisions off of it, and he wouldn't understand the feeler in me, the high level feeler in me, and he couldn't even process that my brain wouldn't work the same way as him. Okay, so again, both of us were finding offense in the way that the other person, he was surprised by my reaction. I thought he was just cruel. But it's the way that we process that information. And specifically here, we're going into making that decision with it. So our feelers, they make decisions on what we would say their gut, on what feels right. They are generally a higher level, compassionate, what we call empathetic. And I just find it really interesting that in today's world, we often try to teach being empathetic and compassionate, whereas a lot of that really comes from your personality. Okay, and again, we do know that personality is influenced by the environment that we live in, the cultures that we grow up in, the families that we're surrounded by. So obviously it can be taught to some extent. Okay, but there is also a default. And so understanding a person's default is really helpful because now we understand, and my brother understands that his default is thinking. And so he needs to slow his brain down and try to actively think about how other people might interpret this, especially in the business world, before he goes ahead with that default thinking that his brain does. Okay. And I know when I'm dealing with him that I need to let myself have my feeling reaction and then go back and think about it, how he might think about it, to understand where he's coming from and or change the way that I speak to him to appeal to this side of decision maker that he is. All right. And you can see here that I am very much on the F side of 64%. Okay. And I would also say, if you are curious about this, that I used to be much more extreme when I was younger. People tend to, as they come into their 30s and 40s, if they're learning about these types of things and if they're developing their social cognition, get closer to the middle because they start to understand it. And you will see that there as they're making that decision. So what do we do in business? Well, we need thinkers. We need thinkers to make hard decisions for us because they're going to be able to handle them better. It will give them peace to sleep at night if they need to fire somebody, if they need to do something that is very difficult, if they can simply rely on the hard facts and the data that tells us that this needed to happen. Okay, we generally see lots of thinkers in financial accounting, not so much management. Financial, we see them in IT, we see them as lawyers, and we generally see them as higher level executives. Okay, we need them to be able to make those hard decisions, and they need, for their sanity, to be able to sleep at night based off of the way they've made it. But we also very much need feelers. We find feelers in human resources, lots of them in marketing, especially equity officers. Okay, and they are so important, and they need to work very closely with our strong thinkers, especially our executives, to make sure that the decisions that are being made, or at least the marketing of the decisions that are being made, are going to appeal to everybody. Okay, so the best teams have both. Okay, and that concept of opposites attract, okay, not so much in personal relationships and attraction, but in business teams, oftentimes you will see two people who you would never think would get along. We see it in politics as well, totally opposite ends of the spectrum, that actually have embraced this concept and realize that they can really learn from each other and they can help each other interpret the world. And so they end up being quite close because of it. Okay. The final indicator is about how we interact with the world ourselves. Okay. And this tends to be after we've interpreted the information, we've made the decisions. Okay. What are we looking for in the world around us? Okay. Our judgers, and I don't love the word because it has a negative connotation. Being a judger is not a negative thing. A J in Myers Briggs is somebody that prefers structure. They like things to be well organized, whether it's physically organized or informationally organized. They want to see things, and I don't love the terminology of the black or white, but in one way or the other. There is a right or there is a wrong. There is a clear instructions. If you like a template, if you want the teacher to give you a clear example of what they want you to do, if you can't sit with issues, okay, you want a solution, you want it to be done. You hear those people give marriage advice, don't go to bed angry, okay? They are going to be judgers. They want things dealt with. Okay. Whereas our perceivers are going to work best with less structure. They actually find that structure, that template, that example can almost be restricting in what they are doing and can slow them down. They're okay to leave decisions open-ended. They're happy to think about it for a while. Okay. They are great at being flexible and handling the unexpected. Okay, so again, personal relationship side, my husband is a P, very strong. I am a J, very, very strong. Okay, so yes, we balance each other out. I need to have a schedule, so I manage our family calendar. I book the kids into activities. I do those things, which he does not enjoy, and honestly probably wouldn't do if it was left to him. However, in a crisis, in an unknown situation, he is phenomenal, and my brain freezes. Okay. And so he is that person that can thrive in that unknown, can jump up and handle whatever's coming at us, good, bad, or the other thing. Also tends to be a lot more creative. He is much more comfortable. He's self-employed. He runs his own business and he can deal with that uncertainty, whereas I really, really struggle with that. Okay. And again, how does knowing that help? Well, again, in business, okay, let's use our J's. Let's use our planners and put them in planning positions. Give them plans. Okay, what can be difficult is if you have a manager that is a P managing a bunch of J's. That's where we see a lot of tension, because that P is very unlikely to give the J's what they need to have things organized and structured. But if that is the case, and P's know this, well, hey, I'm going to give this task to you. Like, you make the agenda for the meetings. You throw them on the calendar. They're going to enjoy that organization and they're going to thrive in that. Okay. As I mentioned, perceivers, they're much better in formal structured startups, new businesses, starting their own businesses. Okay. Whereas judgers are really good project managers, detailed management, trackers, inventory, accountants, those detail oriented things. They're going to do a lot better in that. All right. So it's also really important, even though we've looked at each of these things individually, okay, to look at it at that whole picture. If you remember when I was talking about those thinkers, if they're a thinker and a sensor, that means something even more complex. So everybody, when they do Myers Briggs, is going to get a coding. So mine is ISFJ. I am an introvert. That is sensing, feeling, and judging. Okay. If you did the online test that I sent to you, it actually gives you some suggested jobs based off of your personality, which is really, really cool. Okay. I loved accounting. I was trained to be an accountant. I still to this day love accounting. Okay. But that job isn't right for my personality. And so I felt a lot of dysphoria in that and discomfort in that. Now being a teacher that teaches accounting, that fits me a lot better. And it's interesting when you look at mine that it has right on here, elementary school teachers, right at my alley, which is what, I mean, I'm a high school teacher, but same difference there. All right. Again, if you feel like after you've heard this, that your personality is slightly different than the one that the test gave you, then look for the coding that matches, what you believe that you are, and you can take a look at the jobs that are available to you. Okay, so that was a lot, but what are we going to do with it? This is always the most important thing when you learn a new thing. Okay, what are you going to do with it? One, know yourself. Okay, knowing ourselves, knowing what we are good at. I don't even like the word weakness. Okay, knowing what we are good at and setting ourselves up to do that. Okay, volunteer for those tasks on the teams that you are in. Okay, celebrate those wins. Okay, understand that there's certain things that you're less good at, and so if those are I don't even like less good, that don't come as naturally to you, and if those are things that need to get done, find somebody who's good at those things. Okay, acknowledge that that is not your strength and that is not the best place for your energy to be going. Okay, this can be hugely beneficial if you are still in high school, going into university, and you're looking to work in teams and functions. Okay, get a mix. Make sure you have people that work differently than you. Okay, as I mentioned, consider looking at personality types with job descriptions, or at least looking at jobs and seeing what their main tasks are and if it suits your personality. Okay, and then in your personal life or in your management, in any times of conflict and misunderstanding, try to slow down and consider personality. Okay? Is this a thinking, feeling conflict that's happening when we're trying to make a decision that's really, really difficult? Okay? Is this a sensing intuition difference where we're both looking at the same report or the same picture or the same thing in front of us and we're seeing very, very different things? Okay. What is going on here that might be causing this conflict? Because you know what? We may not be that far off on our differences, but there's this huge conflict that's happening because of the way that we're going about it. And the next step further, if you're interested in doing it, is then you can actually use someone's personality to help you convince them of the thing that you want to convince them of. Okay. And remember, they just might be different than you. So this was a really, really controversial, you could look at a whole bunch of controversial things that go on in society right now. And we know that social media and the way that people present things online make it much more polarizing. Okay, so whether we're talking about COVID and vaccines, whether we're talking about what's taught in schools, whether we're talking about if books should be banned from libraries. Okay, in this case, we were looking at a school board that said they'd no longer wanted police officers in their school. Okay, controversial, blows up online. Okay. How do we look at it? Okay, so again, it says on social media, some people were absolutely livid that police officers are being taken out of the school. They were quoting one or two good things about the program. My child had that police officer come into their law class. It taught them so much. This is a good thing that happens. Okay. Whereas on the other side, they're coming back and being like, how can you possibly only consider the one side of it? They're calling them racist for divulging experiences that happen to only a few and not considering the experiences of everyone. Okay. And it's going back and forth and everybody is ending up hating each other because of it. Okay. But let's think about it. Okay. So let's think of the one side, for example. Somebody who is really, really mad that police officers were taken out of schools, and in their anger was quoting this one really good thing that happened because of the program, or two very good things that happened because of the program. Okay, we don't know them. They're a face online, but what can we maybe guess about their personality a little bit here? Okay, they are picking one or two facts and they are using that to be like, this is why it needs to happen. Okay, they're not looking at the bigger picture. So how they're inputting information, that's going to be sensing. Okay, they found a fact. Okay, whether it's numbers or not, they found a fact, and that's what's stuck into their brain. Okay, how they're making decisions going forward, thinking or feeling, probably pretty strong on the thinking side. Okay, we have a fact that says it's good, therefore it is good. Okay, they're not processing it as how this might make other students feel. Okay, and then judging and perceiving, they don't like the uncertainty. Okay, again, the thing with this is they suspended it and they said it'll take up a year for them to decide. They do not like the uncertainty, so they are probably judging. Okay, so my guess, and also because they're speaking out online very quickly, would be that extroverted side. My guess is that they are an ESTJ. Okay, and again, here's our definition: realists who are quick to make practical decisions. Okay, again, side note, not everybody who is an ESTJ would make this comment necessarily. It also doesn't mean that the person there isn't also just racist, okay? But most likely, if we're giving people the benefit of the doubt, okay, likely they have processed really quickly. They haven't taken the time to think. They have found one or two facts that stick with them. That's what they've made their decision based off of, and they want it clear cut and they want it done, okay? So if we know this about them, is it going to work for us to come at them with feeling sob story emotions of how this program has harmed somebody's mental health, how this program has harmed this, that, or the other thing? Unfortunately, probably not. And that's not necessarily meaning that they're insensitive to those stories. The way that they process that information, okay, they're likely going to come back and be like, okay, but that kid still passed high school. So like where's the data on this? What is the problem? Okay, so we're likely going to want to come back with the type of information that a sensor would want to see. Okay, that a sensor would want to see. Let's find them some facts. Let's find them some hard data that they can process about our side that we're trying to convince them on. Okay, instead of coming at them with the emotional side of it. Again, making a decision, they're not going to do it based off of a feeling side of it. Okay, they're probably going to get frustrated with hearing about the emotions. So let's put those in the back and let's have a logical discussion with them and allow it to be very clear cut and very quick. And again, if we are not that personality, okay, if we are thinkers, then we need to take the time to process that before we go into that conversation if we're trying to have that argument with them. And if you study any of the really good debaters in the world, if you study any of the people who are really good at calling out others, this is what they do. They interpret how this person has come to their original decision based off of their personality, and they use that personality to come back at them in the same way. It doesn't mean it's how they'd think about it, but you can use it to help interpret that that conflict that you're having, and whether it's just finding middle ground so that a friendship can continue to form or a relationship can continue to happen or people can continue to work together, or if you want to take it to the extreme of like, I want to change the world, this is how I'm going to convince all the different personality types of this in political campaigns and any type of campaigns, it can be used in all of those areas. All right, so that is Myers Briggs. That is a basic breakdown of what it is. Please check out the links below if you want more information, and we'll see you in the next video.